The following podcast is part of the MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network.
Wholeness means to me being in a state of joy.
Max Bankman, I'm the new doctor.
Welcome aboard the Odyssey.
ABC Thursdays.
This ship is heaven. We're tending to our passengers' dreams.
I'm in.
From 911 executive producer Ryan Murphy comes a splashy new drama on a luxury cruise ship with Joshua Jackson and Don Johnson.
It's your job to keep everyone alive.
She's in VFib. 1, 2, 3. Clear.
I have a pulse.
You're going to be okay.
Dr. Odyssey. Thursdays, 9/8 Central on ABC. And stream on Hulu.
Wholeness means feeling complete, owning my authentic gifts.
Wholeness is really connected. Everything is connected to everything.
Wholeness is where we have access to all parts of ourselves.
Oh, this is the second time I've gotten this one. Ooh. So the card is Flint. I actually got that one for myself. Let me see. So these are the Crystal Wisdom Healing Oracle. And what's so cool about these cards is it said that the picture is so high quality that it actually can work just like the crystal.
Wow.
So.
Is that a picture of the moon?
No, it's Flint.
Oh, Flint. Oh, wow. Okay.
So Flint stabilizes energy and cuts through to the core of issues, clearing blockages and loosening ties. It opens portals to other worlds and hidden aspects of yourself. So the healing insight is paying attention to energetic boundaries and core strength, cutting detrimental ties, and strengthening your connection to the planet maintains well-being. So the chakra is Earth Star and base. That just means the
root.
Oh, the root. There you
Probably
go.
the root chakra. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay.
That's amazing.
So,
well, today we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to do a short series, a 2-part series where we talk about what we would tell our high school selves. And so in September, we each interviewed our daughters that are right around that age. And so we thought it would be interesting in the month of November as we're talking about maybe some unlearning, what we would talk to ourselves about, what we have learned and what we wish we could, we could have unlearned at the time, or maybe we had to unlearn.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're going to go first, right? Because I want to ask you some questions before we start.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Do you remember what your style was like? Like what kind of clothes you wore?
Yes, I do.
Like? Okay.
Yep, I do.
What was it?
I do. So what's funny is my sophomore year, my sister was going through beauty school at the time.
Okay.
And
so were you a dummy?
I was, so my hair if you looked at my hairstyle now, you would think it was darling. But back then you had to have the bangs, you had like a little bit of the claw bang and so what I had, I was like more like a curly bob, almost like what I have now, but it was more layered. So it kind of looked a little more bulbous, which was just not allowed. So I had to wear a headband every single day. And in one of my classes, one of the guys, we had to talk about each other or something like that. And he was just like, she wears a headband every day. And I was like, you're not supposed to notice that, but that's the story behind. So what would I tell my high school self? I wish, it's funny because in that, I wish I would have been like, just make your own style, own it, but I did not. I was horrified. And in that horrified, I hurt my sister, like she felt bad. Like it was so stressful because I was like, oh my gosh, my hair, this is not the way it should work.
Was it a perm or was it just your natural curl?
I think maybe I must have had my hair was maybe more curly back then. Or I had some kind of a perm because it was thicker perms. In fact, I'll have to put a picture in. I'll put my junior or my high school sophomore. This was my sophomore year, which was the beginning of high school for us.
Oh, okay.
So it was so important to go into high school and have the right hair, which is so funny because, like I say, if you looked at my high school picture now, you'd be like, oh, that's normal. And our hair was not normal. So I should have been grateful that she gave me a hairstyle that would last the ages versus like what's like the hair bang spray up, I'd sit there and blow dry. I totally did that junior year, but
What was your what year was that?
let's see. I graduated in 93, so it was probably 1990, just coming
Okay.
out of and I was very much influenced by Pretty Woman. So I love, I
Interesting.
remember wearing like shorts and then tall socks,
Mm-hmm.
or I was more like a little more fancy, like I was a little more fancy back then. And I had just finished so it'll be part of my story because there was a big transition from ninth grade to 10th grade. And so I was kind of claiming that was a really intense like transition for me that year. So
Okay. All right.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I wonder if, you grew up in Utah. The claw for me was a little bit before that. So I wonder if the styles were just different regionally. So that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, did you have sleepovers? Were you allowed to have sleepovers?
Yes.
Okay.
We loved sleepovers.
Oh, yes. Same.
Yes.
Like we don't let our kids do them, and it's been very distressing to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Times change. You
Times
get more
change.
information, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
Were you closer in high school to your mom or your dad?
That's interesting. Probably so, so part of my story. So in ninth grade, going into ninth grade, I was always the tallest. I was one of the tallest all through, kindergarten on. I was always the very tallest. And I would say I had this struggle because I think I had this little bit of fire in me, but I also was the youngest in my family. And so I always was looking for like a buddy that would that would go ahead of me, So I was always my friends were always very strong spirited. And I was just kind of followed behind. And somehow at the beginning of ninth grade, or it was the summer between ninth grade, and we got our classes like a few weeks before school starts. You get your little classes of where you go, and first thing you do is you call your friends and you say, "Hey, what class do you have? What class do you have?" And um, and I called friend after friend, and I seriously could not find a friend in my classes. I just had strange classes. I was taking Spanish, which a lot of people had taken, or weren't going to take until high school. So I was with just different people, and it was just really like kind of scary to me. And in fact, um, I think I probably dissociated a little bit but what I do remember is being on my bed in my room and my mom coming in and saying everything is not okay and I don't know what to do. And she had been kind of volunteering with this special needs group, and one of the other volunteers just happened to be a therapist, and she told the therapist like, I don't know what we can do, because at the time like insurance was kind of new, health insurance was kind of new. And at least for my dad, he was a pharmacist. I don't know why that was new, but it was like, where do we go? And it was always an issue between my mom and dad. Money was always an issue. So somehow she worked out this deal with this lady that she would, like, let's get some therapy. So that was my very first time going to therapy. Oh, I don't remember all that was said in therapy, and I think it was only just a few short weeks. But one of the things that she really helped me understand was this concept of, she asked me my favorite color. So she said, what is your favorite color? And at that time it was peach. Peach was my favorite color, and my bedroom was peach and green. And that was all important to me. And she said, what is a color that, you don't really love? And I said gray, and which was perfect. And she said, imagine that you are just in a pair of gray clothes and it's just something you're used to, and you've just everything's comfortable and everything's worn in. It's just like this cozy, comfy outfit that you've been used to. And this new kind of place that you're going to is like putting on the pair of peach clothes that are all crisp and new. And she says it's not that you're going to, it's going to take some time, and pretty soon those peach clothes are going to be just as comfortable as your gray clothes. And it's been really instrumental in my life to remember that, because I'm kind of like, all or nothing a little bit. And it's like, oh, I don't have to get used to this for the rest of my life. I just have to get used to this discomfort until I'm used to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I've used that over and over again in my life. It has been huge for me to practice that. And what a gift. And so she kind of helped walk me through going through that first day of school, what it was going to be like to go into class 1 and where, I'll just sit there and what it'll feel like. She really walked me through it and helped me figure that out. And I think I saw her 1 or 2 times, maybe after school started. And, it was really proud of myself, really proud of what I had done. It was like a huge moment for me because I was the youngest in my family, and I'd always kind of defaulted to my siblings or things like that. About the last couple times that we were in therapy, she kind of said, "Is there anything more?" And I said, "Well, my mom and dad fight a lot." And I don't remember what more questions she asked me, but I do remember a feeling of relief as I spoke it. And at the same time, a few years before my siblings, I was the youngest and so much younger. My sister graduated high school when I graduated elementary. So they were off having kids and having business life, creating businesses or having jobs in the real world. And I was still, doing.
They were being adults.
Vision. Yeah, they were doing adult things. And they had seen that, different siblings would move in and out as they would kind of do, go out to school or whatever was happening. And I was the constant there. And they got together one day. They said, "Hey, we're going to have a meeting." And so we went to my brother's house and they just said, "Hey, we're just noticing mom and dad are kind of, it's kind of getting a little ridiculous with their arguing. They were just couldn't be nice to each other in the same room. It was just frustrating. Like if you've seen the TV shows like Archie Bunker or even Everybody Loves Raymond, those parents, like they just had to always snip at each other. And it was frustrating. And so, and it was really that moment, that meeting has been something I've returned to a few times in my healing process, because although, it was for a long time, I'm like, I'm so lucky I have family that will take care of me or care about me or want to help me. And I was pushing aside the feelings of like, but I was really vulnerable. And it was really kind of like that moment where it's like, everything's fine. And then everybody, all of a sudden, somebody showed you a movie or you put a mirror in front of you and you're like, oh, it's not fine. And it was like a crumbling, terrifying kind of feeling. And I hadn't allowed those crumbling feelings or those terrifying feelings because I said, yeah, but they were just trying to be nice, So I've had to do a lot of work to say, okay, they meant and worked and loved me and cared about me. And it was kind of difficult for me, instead of I just kept pushing those difficult feelings away because they were just being nice, and they, and so that was a moment to remember for me to remember that, there needs to be a complexity or there needs to be a polarization, we would call it, in your feelings. And that's okay. Like if there's those, you let both feelings exist at the same time. And I spent decades kind of trying to, just push those away. It didn't show up in my everyday life, but in a way, maybe it did, because in that moment, my very first Reiki session took me to that moment, actually.
Wow.
And, it was kind of Reiki mixed with heart-centered therapy. And, she said, I was feeling a feeling inside and figured it out in my body. And I said, when was the first time you felt this? And it took me back to that meeting. And in that meeting, I felt I was the first time that I came in contact with the difficultiness of that meeting, and how in that meeting, because I was so vulnerable, I kind of gave my power away to my siblings and just tried to, it was like such exposure that I was like going to do harder to not let people see the difficulties I was going through,
What
or
did you
things like
feel?
that.
Did like you had to please your parents now and your siblings and like
Yeah,
this
a little bit.
really
Yep.
tricky.
Yep.
Ooh. Yeah, that's a
Right.
lot for a little kid to feel.
Right. And so, and again, but I thought, but yeah, but it, it would be mean if they just left me there. How kind it was that they said, hey, we're not going to let this happen to her. But I didn't allow for my own feelings to exist, which were,
Nobody
it,
taught you how to do that. How would you do that?
yeah, like, because we're kind of taught you've got to blame someone, and there was no one to blame. It was just, that was very vulnerable. And it was really hard to see that what I was experiencing, other people noticed. You're just kind of in your own head and dealing with it and trying your best to fill in the cracks and to make sure mom and dad just were in a good mood so that they wouldn't fight, or keep them apart, in different ways. That was a lot of effort I had going on. And yeah, you're right. It kind of took on where I now was kind of feeling like I didn't want, my siblings to, I wanted to be okay for my siblings. And so I gave some of my power away. And so I've had to go back and get that. Um, and so I've done, as far as like telling her that self, I have gone back and talked to that girl a lot. She was younger. She was probably 10, 11, but I've had to be with her a lot. And because I had this, I think in that moment, because I kind of gave my power, my trust, I think is what I learned in Reiki. When I gave my trust over to other people, I'm like, well, what do you think, kind of a thing, versus going inside.
I
I
actually
also,
think that's pretty normal, but I think it's cool that you can recognize that and see
yeah,
it. But I think that's really normal.
yeah, yeah, I think it's typical for sure, because we don't teach any other way. But instead of saying, well, how do you feel about it, it was just what's going to be the least, what's the path of least resistance where I'm not in an uncomfortable place.
Right.
And so, so then with my friends, it was kind of like I kind of transferred that to my friends, where it's like, hey, let's be my buddy, like, I didn't want to do things. I wouldn't go places without a buddy. I didn't know how
Mm.
to be on my own, which I think is probably typical too. But it reached this point where ninth grade classes came out and I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any friends. And my mom tried to change my classes. We tried all the stuff to keep it in the status quo, to keep going on the same path we were. And it didn't allow me. It wouldn't let me. And my star chart showed it. It said there was a moment that was a really impactful moment in my life where kind of a new awakening happened for me. And it really did. And
Wow,
so,
that's so cool. That's really cool.
yeah. So my therapist called in my parents. I think they were one at a time. I'm not really sure, and had this talk with them and let them know, like, this can't happen anymore. She's getting a little triangulated between you, because I was the youngest. So it was like, my dad would say, hey, let's go do this. And I'd like, I don't want to. And my mom was happy to make him feel stupid about it, or so I was in these little triangular things a lot. And she, both of them, recognized, they were kind of caught, right? They were kind of caught. And it was just transformational for me, because she helped me understand what was going on. And somehow a part of me said, I get it. And I'm not going to do that anymore. And I
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily mad or angry at my parents. I just wasn't, it was just like that. It was almost just like that contract just dissolved. It just wasn't going to play that part anymore. And a few months later, I know my mom came to me and she was in tears, and she was like, I miss you. I know that you're working on yourself, but I really, really miss you. And I felt bad for her. And I knew that she would have really loved for me to say, okay, mommy, let's be back together again. At this time again, I'm 15. But I was just, I couldn't, I didn't even know how to play that role anymore. It was just such a flip. And so I started to do some things that were independent of myself. And um, I told them I wanted to go to take modeling classes. There was this modeling school, and I went and did that for a couple of years. And I didn't know anybody, and it was just night and day. I just started to be my own person a little bit more. And
Can I ask you a question about your mom really quick?
yeah,
Was that an opportunity for her? Did she find other places to find that friend, that validation, or did that not happen?
No, it was, in fact, so she always had other friends. Like I would go with her and her friends. Like she had friends, but for her, she grew up, her mom was unwell a lot of the times and had to have lots of expensive surgeries, and they were not wealthy people at all. So she remembers they would sell furniture to pay for, they'd sell stuff to pay for these operations. And her mom was very, very tender, and so she had an older sister that was like 3 years older than her, and then her younger brother was 11 years older than her. And she had to quit high school to take care of her little brother.
Wow.
So she had done a lot of parenting her parents, or parenting her siblings. So I am sure to her, I was like, what I was showing up for her was nothing that was, besides what was expected of her. And my grandpa, my grandma was always my grandpa's priority, like just cared for her and was tender toward her. My dad was not. He was, in fact, my sister wonders if he was even had a little bit of, I don't know if a little bit, but had some Asperger's. Like he's very intelligent, had several degrees, but as far as interpersonal skills, not very many, especially not until later in his life did I ever see any of that. It was just focus on ahead. And he had, I mean, I get where he comes from too. He is, there's stories from his side of the family too. But I recognize that she, my mom, that must have been so foreign to her to have a daughter say, no, I'm not going to do this because there's no way. Her parents were so loving and kind. She wouldn't have said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. But she took some of that pain where her parents couldn't show up for her, and she wanted my dad to show up for her. And there was always this upset, a little bit of bitterness. So after I had my thing about 15, I was married again by the time right before I was 20. So, you have years can kind of go by where it's like, zhuzh back and forth. But when I got married, and so all of the family had left the home, she had her own transformation. Instead of choosing to heal herself or to move, inward, she just really longed for that outside world to change. And I love my mom, and she's passed, but I know without a doubt that her passing had everything to do with that decision. She just doubled down on this frustration, and it kind of, I mean, I would have to screen her phone calls as an adult sometimes, because she would call, hi, just having a hard time. She'd want somebody to vent to. And we would talk to her again. We had different meetings again with her to say, Mom, like, we're not the person to vent to about Dad. I don't know what to do with that. I remember saying to her, okay, why don't we just put it on the record? Dad is the worst person in the world. Okay. Let's just say that. Okay, I agree with you. You agree with me. Can we move on? Because I had little kids I had to take care of. I didn't want to hear the same story 5,000 times. I did not. And that was really hard on my mom. And she, and I have a little more compassion now, because I mean, at that time I was living more of a fairy tale land in my own marriage and with my own kids. And so all that complexity was just completely foreign to me. I would be a little different with her now. But that was, so yeah, it took her. I mean, it took 20 years, but it wore down her body until she died. Like, she died at a younger age. She was in her 70s. She wasn't old enough to die.
But I guess as I look at it, you were a chain breaker, but I really believe you broke that chain of responsibility of those kids, being responsible, however far back that went.
Right.
But your mom couldn't break that chain, and it took her. And what would have happened to you had you kept that chain?
Mm-hmm.
You could have fallen the same thing. I mean, how old was your mom when she passed?
I think she was 70.
Oh, so she was older, but
70, yeah.
that's a
But
long time to have that.
yeah, but she died like of a urinary tract infection. I mean, nothing that would take somebody, you know. It was just and just there was a lot more. That's lots of episodes that we can I'm happily to get
Yeah,
into.
we need to
It's
go
just
back to
long
you,
story.
but
Yeah. So I'm really proud of that click that happened to that young 15-year-old that I could start to build on myself, you know, and work toward myself. And it really helped me because my sophomore year, um, my friend had gotten a boyfriend that lived kind of far away, and her mom didn't want her driving by herself. And so I became her, you know, her buddy that would go with her, and we would go hang out. And there was her boyfriend had a friend that we would it was not like we were formally set up, but you know, it was like you'd kind of pair off. And we ended up going to homecoming dance that October. And I was kind of excited, you know, or whatever. And but we get into the car, and his dad, or her boyfriend's drove his parents' big Cadillac, and we're listening to tunes on the radio. And we get in the back of the car, and we're driving probably about 25 minutes to the restaurant, and this boy just starts putting his hand up my dress. And I was kind of confused. We talked about it was like 13 going on 30. Like, I was so naive. Like,
when her boyfriend does that little dance and she's looking at him like, giggling, 'cause she's like, this is not the road I'm thinking about. The road
right.
I'm going down.
Because I was at 15, I was all about the romance. It was like, oh, I love you. No, we can't be together. Oh, we can be, you know, and then you embrace and you kiss, and like that's the love story. And then you fall into bed because you're so much in love, right? Like, I didn't
Right.
understand.
And everything's perfect.
Yeah. And so for him wanting to put his hand up my dress, I was just like, what do you know, like, no, thanks, you know, no, no. And I spent most of that night fighting him, and, you know, fighting him and pushing him and telling him no. And I've thought about that girl in that back seat a lot, because I don't know how I know it, had I not had my therapy, I don't think I would have been able to say no.
Right.
I think my answer would have been very different. Not because I wanted to, but because after the 20th time, you know what I mean? Or
Well, I think you
feeling
start to
like,
question, like, it must be my problem if it's,
right, yeah, what's going on? What's happening? And later the next week, you know, we went to they came back and came to a football game, and I had our pictures that we had taken to give to him, and we sat and watched the game. And he had brought another friend and just spent all his time talking to the friend, didn't give me the time of day, which was really like pit in my stomach. Like, he was telling me, like, disapproving of me, you know. That's what it felt like. And I just felt horrible. I just felt horrible. And luckily I kind of went, we've talked about this before. I go to anger more than shame. And I guess luckily I did, because when we went to the car, I grabbed the pictures and I just threw them on the ground. I said, there's your pictures, take them. You know, I was mad. And he got so angry with me that how could I treat him that way?
Right.
And at the time, I just feel like that was just a hairline decision for me to not. It could have changed me so much in a couple of ways. But one, because that it was so that was such gaslighting is the word. I felt that was very much gaslit in that kind of relationship, because I had done nothing wrong, but it felt like, what did I do wrong? You know, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. And I think, you know, so what I would tell that girl is, you know, I don't think I ever told my mom. I don't think I ever told hardly anybody that had happened. Maybe my husband later on. I didn't ever tell anybody, because I think there was a part of me that thought, well, I deserved it, or it wasn't nice, you know, or I just felt like it was just like yucky. And it wasn't until I kind of learned about trauma that I understood that there was some trauma that happened there, because if I listen to certain music, I'm right back. I'm right back in the back seat feeling, I can feel, now I'm able to observe it, but even now I can feel that feeling of just, it almost just felt like I was sweating out of my body, just so uncomfortable, and like wanted to cry, but you've got to be cool, and I wish I would have spoken out and said something. And I have a lot of compassion for girls that are in situations like that, and it goes another way. Because I feel like I was, by the skin of my teeth, did I not go the other way? Did that not, something might have happened even, and I might have, and yeah, would I have said, it would have been like, yeah, I guess I agreed to it. But not because I wanted to, but
Right.
because I just was tired of saying no.
Well, and I wonder, like when you said the hairline thing, I was thinking about Marvel and how they have that, TWA where all the timelines can split off. And you wonder, if you had just given in because you thought, okay, well, I should do this because it's important to him or whatever you decided in your mind, how you rationalized it,
Right.
how that could have affected all the decisions that you would have made afterwards, right? Like you would have probably let go of your sense of self a little bit easier and just said, well, it's important to him, so it must be important, or
Yep.
just those little things. And in every situation of life, you can find those situations,
Yeah.
even when it comes to holding a door open for somebody, right? It's like that
Yeah.
split second decision. Are you going to be selfish or do it for yourself? And I'm not saying either one is right or wrong,
Right.
but sometimes it's that intention, right, that's behind that action. And I'm really proud of that 16-year-old self,
Yeah, I was 15,
15.
almost
Yeah,
almost 16. Yeah.
because that takes a lot of sense of self. That was
Mhm.
like you said, you were sweating. It was effort. It might not have looked like effort to anybody else, but there was effort there.
It was
I'm
so
really
much
proud.
effort. Yeah, and I'm so proud of that girl. And at the same time, I'm like, I don't know how she did it. Like, I don't know how she did it. Because that was hard. It was
Yeah.
really, really hard. And and I'm so grateful for the therapy I had. I think that I wouldn't have been able to do that had therapy not helped me gain a little bit of that sense of myself. What a different, like you say, I would have been so different. It would have been, I feel like it would have been like that sliding doors moment where
Hmm.
I would have ended up somewhere very different.
Yeah.
And so I'd tell her, I'd be proud of her, but I'd also kind of talk to her about, maybe not being so naive a little bit. I wish that I hadn't been so surprised or confused by what was happening. I really was. I was
But
like,
how else could you, there's nothing else you could have done.
right,
I
right.
mean, you did exactly right. You were doing exactly the right thing. And you have moments where you show up naive. I've
Yeah,
had those moments and it's horrible. It feels gross. And you're like, oh, the world is really bigger than what I thought. Crap.
yep,
It doesn't feel good, but that's how we learn. We bump up against that wall and
yeah,
realize that we have to sometimes push it down.
yep, yep. It's true. It's true. Yeah, it was just a momentous part of my life, a momentous moment, a momentous decision. And so that was sophomore year. Again, that was the beginning of high school for me. And I went to junior year. And then in between junior and senior year, my sister came home. She'd gone to Japan. She'd lived in Japan and met a family over there. And, um, and it'll show up later, but she was like, yeah, they were actually from here and we're
Okay.
going to be back soon, and she's like, when he comes back, you guys need to date. And I was like, okay. And so, but she'd also told me, she was like, she's my closest sister, still 6 years ahead of me, but she was my closest in age sister. And she was like, if I could go back in my senior year, I would get as much college done as you can, like really just move towards the rest of your life. High school isn't that important, kind of a thing. And I was like, yeah, 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 whatever. And then my friend said, hey, we might go to college and do college. And I said, okay, let's go. And so I think like the next day was like the meeting. We went and signed up for our classes, and I was going to college my senior year.
Wow.
And I'd go back for like my last class at high school. And in fact, my class was, I was just to get an elective credit. I was a teacher's aide for an English teacher. And
Okay.
he happened to teach college classes at night. So when he knew what I was doing, he was so supportive, and he would be like, you know what, you come when you want, you write a note so that if you get caught in the hall, you have a note from me, but you come when you want, but you focus on your school. And he says, and you write me a couple papers, 2 or 3 papers, and I'll put them in the school newspaper because he ran the school newspaper. So I got front page stories in the school newspaper, and I didn't even belong. I'm sure those other kids were like, "Who? That's so unfair." What a gift he was. And yeah, I remember sitting in the back of his class and one time and him talking about how they'd gone and seen A Few Good Men the night before it just come out in theaters, and it was so like that's just vivid in my mind. Like, isn't that funny that was out in theaters at one point? It was just funny. But he was a funny, kind of cool guy, and I really appreciated it because he made me understand how special it was what I was doing. He helped me recognize how special it was that I was going to college, my senior year. And in fact, when I graduated, they wouldn't let me graduate with high honors because I didn't have any AP classes. However, I was taking college classes, so it was like disappointing.
Yeah.
But when I got to college, so there was a time period between when school started for high school and school started for college, and they had what was called an interim quarter. So we were on campus, but it was all just high school kids from, I think there was probably 10 or so high schools that fed into this college. And the first day we all met in this one big room, and they were trying to shuffle everybody, and you could tell they were still trying to figure out, like, okay, if you have this class, you're going to be in this classroom here, da, 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 da. And at the beginning, they're like, okay, who's from this school? Who's from this school? And I think I happened to see this guy that stand up at this one school. And I was like, ooh, he's cute. Like, I like him. And so for 3 weeks, I had a plan because, well, actually, let me rewind. The first time I need to say this differently, actually. I just messed up the story because I saw him from the back. He raised his hand to be with this class, and he had like shaved head and like these long blonde bangs. And back then, you could tell who was like the like losers and who was like the academics, and he was like this. I'm like, he should be like smoking in the parking lot. What is he doing here? And a couple of weeks later, like the next week in class, he comes in the door and I see his face and I went, oh, I want to meet him. So my friends were probably tired of me every day trying to scheme how I was going to meet this guy. And I was going to use this friend that my sister knew from the same place he was from in order to have an in, to like say, hey, give me something to go up to and say, hey, I know this guy. Do you know him? He lives by you. That was going to be my excuse. But my sister, she'd been living in Japan. So when I said, what's his name? She said, Monty Wingle. And I heard like it was all one word. And it was like, sounded like Japanese to me. Like, I was like, okay. And it took a couple weeks until finally she's like, oh, it's Monty Wingle. So Monty, all I could remember is Monty. I'm like, Wingle, I can't even understand that. Don't even understand that. So I was prepared this Monday morning to go to school, all the way up to school. I'm like, you guys, his name is Monty. And we had to be in this big, huge classroom again, where we'd meet once a week with everybody just at high school. It was a communications class.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in one of those big, like lecture hall kind of things. So it was full of people, and it was kind of the last day of those classes. And so the teacher, I have a note. I have it in my like special box. We call them special boxes. And it's like me telling a note to my friend, like, he's right over there. Like, he's 3 from this edge right there on the front row. And yeah, I think this and da, 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 da. I'm going to ask him about my friend, about this guy. And the teacher goes over and hands him a piece of paper and says, can you pass these out to everybody? So he starts passing them out.
Wait, okay, is this the cute guy or is this Monty, or Monty and the cute guy the same person?
Well, we don't know that. It's the cute guy. It's the cute guy.
Okay.
So I don't care about this Monty. I'm just going to use Monty to get to know this cute guy.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm like all prepared for after class to go ask him about Monty. Do you know a guy named Monty? Like, this was going to be my in. This is going to be my in. so this cute guy gets asked to pass out papers, and he's at the top of at the top of the room, with all those stairs. And the professor, she's like, "Hey, you're so nice. What is your name?" Which was so random because it was chaos in the room. And he yells out, "Monty." And I went, "Oh my gosh,
You
that's
guy is
him.
Monty.
They are the same. They are the same." And so after that class, I went up to him and I'm like, "Hey, you might know my sister." Like, I can tell you exactly what I was wearing.
Wow, serious?
Yeah, oh yeah. It was a poignant moment. And we ended up starting to date, and about let's see, over 2 years later, we got married, and we dated that whole time.
Wow.
But I would tell that young girl, I would tell that sweet, darling, cute, like, because for the longest time, okay, I didn't tell you, we were also born on the same day in the same hospital.
Yeah,
So we were born, it's crazy. We were born on the same day in the same hospital. We met because my sister went to Japan. His family happened to be living in Japan, but we were both from here, and then came back and both went to college ourselves and found each other on our own. It's
serious.
crazy. It's crazy.
Yes.
But I wish I could tell that young girl, who still only believed in fairy tales, that, you're going to marry this guy, and it's going to be wonderful, and it's going to be amazing, and it's going to have hard times, and it's going to be full of joy, and it's going to be full of grief, and it's going to drive you crazy. It's going to drive you crazy, and you're going to drive him crazy. And this is the way it's going to be, and this is the way it's supposed to be. And it's okay. It's okay, because he's going to teach you more about yourself than and push you into those peach clothes more often than you want to. And you're going to grow because of it. And it's going to be okay. And we're all here cheering you on. That's probably the most important thing, is there are people and angels and guides and all of that kind of stuff cheering you on, and knowing that this is actually the best path for you. This is the way you can grow. And I wish I could tell myself that.
Yeah, a lot of comfort in the hard times to know that, because when they come up, you're kind of surprised, like, wait,
right.
What happened to the fairy tale?
Right, because it was like, okay, no, this is correct and everything else is not. I mean, that in my mind, it was like, this is the way it goes. This is right, and everything else was wrong. And that just doesn't sustain, that just doesn't sustain. And the thing is I had seen my mom try to make it the same, right? Trying to make this is the way it should be, and everything else is not. But it didn't pertain to me, because everything was fine until I reached my crossroads and had to kind of take another path that said, okay, who am I? Who are we? And really take the slow road on that journey, and I wish I would have, if I would just tell her, this is going to be a journey, and it's going to be okay, and we're with you. That's the biggest thing. We're with you, and this is good for you.
Oh, that's really cool. Oh, thank you. Well, I just have 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
What did you want to do after high school? What was your future plans?
So it's so funny because, I had this boyfriend my senior year, and then we ended up getting married close to 19. So I was going to be a mom. I was going to be a mom, and I was just, I had all my siblings, especially my sisters, a couple of them. One was traveling the world and never married, but the other two, they had gotten married, they stayed home with their kids, and I was just going to be another one of those stay-at-home moms. That's what I was going to do. And never occurred to me to do anything else, until my youngest went off to kindergarten, and I was so excited because finally I was going to have some time to make sure the house was all the way clean. And that lasted about 1 week. And then this whole existential crisis of, am I really only here to clean the house? Is that really who I am? And I didn't have a degree to fall back on. I didn't have anything to do. And I wish I would have told that version of myself, to really, from the time I got married, which, was to say, really, really spend some time on yourself, feeding that self. letting yourself be Mechelle rather than everything else. And if you go back, the episode that we talked about where we interviewed several witches, in that conversation, it was really interesting because the one, Courtney, made this point that she said, the thing that the witch gets such strange and is so like, we're so resistant to that kind of idea, but it really is about, whether when they're a mom, they're in a relationship with their kids. When they're a wife, they're in a relationship with their husband. When they're this, whatever their career is, they're in a relationship with their career. And the witch for her was who she is in a relationship with herself. And she has an acronym for it, and I can't remember what it is. So you'll have to go back and listen to that episode, because it was just really enlightening that the story that I had of like, who am I all by myself?
Yeah.
Not in service of anyone else, but in service to myself. I didn't even know that could happen. I didn't even know that was available.
Right.
And I wish I would have known that sooner. And I think I would have been a better mom and everything. I think I would have been
my
much
girls.
better.
I hope I can teach my girls that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yes.
Wow. And then the last question is, would your high school self be shocked at your life today?
I think yes, because it's number one, I was just so focused on being a mom, and I didn't even know time ended, like that time would end. It just was never in my frame of mind, or that I would own a business, or that I would be doing healing work, or that I would be I would be, focused on understanding my inside self. It was just very much how you present outside, right? That's kind of what's the default for women.
Right.
If nothing on top of everything else. So I think she would be shocked. I think she would be, I hope that she would be like, okay, then she would make different decisions. She'd be like, okay, now that really helps me make different. She would have made different decisions had she known where I was at now, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
So
I think it's so fascinating that we picked the flint card, because isn't flint used to create fire? Like
yeah.
those sparks.
Yes,
Yeah,
totally.
and there's those little events that happen to you, or these little sparks that
Yep.
just ended up creating a beautiful life. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I love that.
When most people are asked what they want, they will answer, I want to be happy. But happy takes practice. And that's what the Wholeness Library is all about. So check it out free at thewholenessnetwork.com.
Have you ever wondered about life after death, or if it's possible to connect with loved ones on the other side? I'm Suzanne Giesman, and I'm a medium, author, and spiritual teacher. Join me on my podcast, Messages of Hope, where it's my mission to teach you how to live a consciously connected and divinely guided life. I'll share with you proven methods that anyone can use to connect with all levels of consciousness. Listen here on the mindbodyspirit.fm podcast network.